Kyle Crane has been through a lot. From finding out the company he was working for was letting an entire city of people die to find a cure, to becoming one of their experiments himself. He's had to do and see a lot of horrible things to survive. And just to make it worse, he's had to see almost all of his loved ones die right in front of him. So add 13 years of gruesome torture to that list. And you gotta start thinking, this has gotta do something to his mental health, right? Let me start by saying I am by no means educated enough to diagnose this man with anything, but by knowing what he's been through and by seeing his behaviors, it's clear that something's wrong with him. And that's even more evident from the intro alone. He has explicitly said that he doesn't care about dying anymore, and the montage we get of his torture is probably how he actually remembers it. Because that's what happens when you're in a cycle where nothing changes. Your memory will be hazy. Imagine the coronavirus lockdown, but instead of 1 to 2 years, it was 13! 13 years of brutal torture and experimentation. He must have had no hope left by the end that the cycle would end. So when Olivia offers him freedom, of course he's gonna be skeptical. Because everyone he's met in the last decade has had some kind of malicious intent towards him. And also because, well, the last time someone tried to rescue him, it didn't go so well. Rest in peace, Spike! Eventually, when he does get outside, something still doesn't seem right about him. I think his body and mind is still readjusting to the fact that he's free. That he can feel the wind on his skin, breathe fresh air, and talk to people that don't want to actually hurt him. And I feel we see this physical and mental uneasiness even more in the first few story missions, especially when talking to people. He felt more wary of them, asked a lot of questions, and was in general using quote-unquote disrespectful language. But then again, this is probably the language he's been using for the past 13 years. Because when he wasn't in total social isolation, he was around people that he, well, didn't want to be around. So of course it's gonna be weird for him to be around people that, again, don't want to hurt him. So no wonder he's behaving like this. Now, I don't know if this is what Techland wanted us to get from their writing, but that's at least what I got from Roger Craig Smith's performance of Kyle Crane. He did such a good job portraying Kyle's emotions in the moments, and just making him sound like the broken, old, mentally unstable man he really is. And speaking of mentally unstable, this actually brings me to my next point about how he avoids his mental health in order to not break down. So you might have noticed, like I have, that no one really talks about his time in the Baron's hands, at least not in full detail. And I think there could be several reasons for this. One, it could be that Kyle's allies don't want to bring up his trauma to protect him from the chance of maybe spiraling or something worse. And this is even further proven when, for example, Olivia takes extra precaution in making sure that Kyle is okay with hearing what her father did to him while working for the Baron. The only other option I can think of is that Techland just didn't know how to write him dealing with his trauma. But I don't think the second one is completely true, because as we'll see later, the writers do actually dedicate an entire side quest to explaining what's going on in his mind. But right now, let's talk about what we can observe from the outside. Kyle barely ever talks about his time with the Baron to people, and when he does, he never gives the full picture, just a few details here and there, and usually only the parts that's relevant to the conversation. But you can't blame him. We've seen what happened in his flashbacks, but that was only a part of it. Imagine if we saw everything he'd experienced. Even from the little snippets we do have, I think we can all tell that it was extremely traumatizing to go through. So it's only natural that it would be hard to talk about. And especially for such a traditionally quote-unquote masculine man. I'm guessing you all know how mental illness is seen for men in the patriarchy. And so you'd see why he'd try to hide his pain too, right? He's an old man now, And despite having missed out on the last 13 years of his life, he probably still thinks that people are only gonna see him as an old, deranged man. So he hides his pain, maybe masks it as anger, because despite everything physically and mentally that's changed about him, at heart, he's still Kyle Crane. He doesn't want to be a burden. He wants to help people. As the game goes on, he seems to find himself again more. He learns to find his empathy again instead of only thinking about revenge, which we can see with Rick. And despite the sheriff betraying him, he forgives her. You could say it's because he needed her to defeat the Baron, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's also about him regaining his sense of humanity after being called a monster and an animal for so many years. So in a way, despite not having killed the Baron yet, he proved them wrong. He's not some delirious lab rat. After everything, he's still a human being. He'll keep fighting despite all the challenges thrown his way, despite not being able to take a break, or grieve or cry, because there's no time to. He puts his already crumbled mental health aside for the people who need him, but also for himself, I think. Because if he began unpacking all of his trauma now, I think he'd break down. Because sure, while he is strong, if you begin confronting the thing you've been running from this entire time, it's most likely gonna take a lot of effort, energy, and time that again, Kyle doesn't have. Think of it as pulling a bullet out of a wound without anything to stop the blood from spilling. It just wouldn't make sense to do right now because you don't currently have the tools to help yourself heal. And knowing all this, that's why it's so much more tragic when he is forced to unpack his trauma, albeit in a dreamlike state. In the last part of this video that I want to talk about, the side quest Don't Look Back in Anger. This is the original reason why I wanted to make this video. Oh my goodness. When I originally saw a playthrough of this side quest, saw all the scenes, heard what Crane was saying to himself, actual jaw drop. It reveals all the feelings he's bottled up over the years. The guilt, the anger, the self-hatred, how he still grieves and mourns for the people he's lost in Haran. I can't take it anymore! He can't even recognize his voice anymore. Do you know how tragic that is? He calls himself a monster and an animal for something that isn't even his fault. I wanted to cry over a side quest. The self-hating voices never stopped, they just multiplied. They became louder. He screamed at himself at one point. Kyle was forced to look back, to face his demons, literally fight versions of himself. He's been fighting with survivor's guilt for so long, so tell me why they needed to give him more self-hatred by making him get captured because of bait that was literally designed for him specifically. I would honestly call this the best side quest in the entire game, because it adds further onto the main story. Kyle's story, because despite Aiden being the beast and all the people who's helped him along the way, Dying Light the Beast was about Kyle. It was about him escaping the brutal torture that the Baron had put him through and getting his revenge on him. And I am so pleasantly surprised at how well they wrote this character arc for him. Because despite the story mainly being advertised as mainly focusing on Kyle's revenge against the Baron, his constant mental conflict and need to prove to himself and others that he's not a monster, along with his journey of learning to trust people again, makes the story in this new chapter in Kyle's character so much more compelling to go through. And while I think there were some holes in how the characters behaved, including Kyle, I think most of it can be explained with remembering the fact that these people have been through a lot. But overall, I fucking love Kyle's character in this. But in general, I do just like the story. It gets a 9 out of 10 from me.
Wow. Would you look who made it to the end of the video?
Thank you for listening to me yap for this long. It really does mean a lot. Whether you're one of my friends, you know who you are, or someone who doesn't know me. I know that however long this video was isn't enough to actually cover the entirety of Kyle Crane's psyche, but I really don't have the energy to continue. I tried to put as many of my points in and as fast as I could, and I'm sure that's evident in some parts of the video. Hopefully someone someday will do Kyle's character justice by making a more thorough and detailed analysis than I did though. But like I said at the start, I don't actually know if this is how the writers wanted us to interpret Kyle's character and what he goes through in this. The things I'm assuming that's happening inside of his brain are only based off of behaviors he outwardly shows. For example, I don't actually know if he's not talking about his pain on purpose, or even masking said pain and presenting it as anger instead. Because while of course he's gonna be angry after being basically kept a prisoner for 13 years, it seems like to me that he's desperately holding on to his anger and thoughts of revenge as a distraction to not think about the horrors he's been through, a coping mechanism, if you will. But in the end, this is all interpretation of the masterpiece that is Kyle Crane's character. I can only assume he feels this way from things we've seen Kyle go through, physically and mentally, from the little bits we see of what his brain still remembers. Get it? 'Cause trauma-induced brains hide memories to protect themselves? But even though this is all interpretation and not canon, we know that something's wrong with him. Star Child himself thinks that Kyle Crane has PTSD. And while he hasn't been officially diagnosed, would we really be surprised if he had it? So the point is, while my analysis of his character may not be correct, we know that he definitely has something. And that, along with knowing that his trauma does affect him and his behaviors in some way, is what makes his character and journey throughout the story so much more compelling and interesting to me. And hopefully it did for you too, considering how long you made it into the video. Okay, but before I end this, I just want to further explain what I meant with the patriarchy thing from before. What I was really trying to bring attention to is the fact that a lot of men have trouble talking about their mental health. And I think that's how Kyle is too, considering 1, how masculinely he seems to want to present himself, and 2, feelings are hard to talk about, especially when you're around people that don't seem to want to or don't have the time to listen. And that goes for anyone, of course, not just men. I've just noticed a lot of cis boys and men have trouble opening up to their loved ones because they think it's gonna make them look weak. Because that's what society has planted into their heads since day one. Just like how AFABs are told and taught to be mothers and caregivers when we're not even out of school yet. And God forbid if you don't conform to the gender binaries, because then you're told to kill yourself despite not having done anything wrong but existing. Okay, I'm done for real now. Take care of yourselves and stay safe, because that's what Kyle Crane would want you to do.